Good afternoon. I'm Janice Swift, the superintendent of Ann Arbor Public Schools, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this Thursday afternoon town hall meeting. We're going to share today about some updates in the district, starting with the work that we've accomplished over these 12 weeks of building closure during the COVID crisis this spring. We've been working hard to distribute food for our students in need, breakfast and lunch for 7 days a week, beginning the Monday following closing on March 16th, and we'll continue to offer that those food distribution locations, 16 locations around the city. We're also distributing personal and household necessities. We'll soon pass 350,000 meals distributed. I just want to give a shout out and a big thank you to members of our team, our Chartwell's team, our Durham team who've worked so hard, and many of our staff volunteers who've worked so hard to make that happen. We've also distributed about 3,400 technology devices, and that includes hotspots to support families in connectivity. We've been measuring week by week the participation among our students, and this past week, our schools are reporting around an 88% to 91% participation rate, and we have about 99% of our students and families connected for their distance learning. We've been working every week to grow our professional skills, to be able to offer distance learning in a more connected and more robust way. And I just want to give a big shout out to our teachers and staff, to our parents and community who've worked so hard to learn and to really build this distance learning format while we were going this spring. And as we come to the wrap up of this school year tomorrow, I just want to give a special thank you. I know it's been a very challenging time for teachers and for staff, for parents, and for our community. We will be offering a full menu of summer learning opportunities. We feel like catching our students up from this academic gap that they've had in terms of being away from our school buildings, away from that daily face-to-face contact. We know that this gap is something that we'll need to press in hard to improve over the coming weeks and months. We have a short-term and mid and long-term plans in progress to ensure that our children feel supported and that they have every opportunity for us to close those gaps and to ensure a learning connection. So I'm thrilled to share today the update on our summer enrollment. We are well beyond 3,000 students who will be participating elementary, middle, and high school for credit. And we're so grateful. I want to give a thank you to all of the teachers who have stepped up to teach during the summer term. I know this is a time when lots of folks are feeling a little exhausted and overwhelmed, and I really appreciate our teachers who have stepped up to take on that extra challenge of offering our summer learning opportunities this summer. For students who perhaps are already enrolled, we're just so excited to offer our middle school challenges, to offer our elementary badging program, to offer the specialized supports for students with special needs. And we have hundreds of students and families who've signed up for that extra support. So we have a great summer ahead. But you know, Mr. Cluley, we're really here today to talk about fall. We've highlighted the spring and the summer, but let's move now to our fall 2020 learning framework. The planning for fall is underway, and I want to thank all of the members of our teaching team and our leaders who are engaged in that deep work every day. They're putting in a lot of hours of planning now, because what we've shared so far is really just a framework. There are far more questions than answers. If you think about the timeline, we're now about 13 weeks since building closure and the beginning of the beginning of that COVID crisis, our first deaths recorded in Michigan. We're now about 13 weeks from that point, and we're now about 12 weeks from that August 31st, first day of school for fall 2020. So I do want to just frame up this evening that this is a very early point in the process, but we wanted to set out some fundamentals of our framework so that our parents, our staff, and our community could go ahead and help us think about this and plan together. You know, we've sent out over the previous couple of days surveys to our staff, to our students, and to our parents. And I hope that if you haven't yet taken the opportunity, that you will respond to that survey. That helps us to get some preliminary data that the planning team can use as they work into the more detailed part of our planning. But let's talk just a little bit about the fundamentals of the framework. We don't know the exact health protocols yet because we're still 12 weeks out, but we are following the CDC recommended protocols for gathering of folks and for returning to school. And we know that that will include the work of Miss Jenna Bacalor, who's our, if you will, health officer, our Ann Arbor Public Schools health leader. We're working with Keely Hoffman and our 12 amazing school nurses. And then we'll be bringing online some members of a health team that will support at the schools with screening and with contact tracing. We know that contact tracing will be an important part of our work this fall. So we have health and safety as our top priority. Our goal is to communicate regularly and consistently with you as we begin to get through midsummer and know a lot more about the details of our health plan for fall. I know that most parents are really focused in, secondly, on how is it that we will achieve teaching and learning given the many uncertainties of the COVID environment. And we know that we will offer synchronous learning opportunities. We know that we have 3 settings on our dial for the year. It's too early to know exactly which setting we'll be on, but we know that we could be in a virtual setting with synchronous learning. We will be providing devices, technology devices, for every student in the district and for every instructional staff member in the district. We will be supporting with connectivity. Teams of teachers are already thinking and working on how to align curricula for 2020-21 so that we can be sure we're catching our students up and closing those gaps that may have emerged during this closure time. We know that we'll be offering specialized learning supports for all of our students who have those additional needs, whether those are specialized learning needs, such as those in an IEP, whether those are learning needs related to second language, students who have English as their second language, whether those learning needs are related to Title I or poverty impact. We are working in the plan to ensure that we're meeting those needs as well. I want to share that even though we are clear that we'll offer synchronous instruction in the fall, if we have to be virtual for part or for all of the time at some point. We aren't talking about a 6 or a 7 hour screen time for students. We just know that that's not the best way to approach our learning together. So our synchronous learning time will be interspersed with time for students to have physical activity, to have breaks, maybe to do some independent reading or some work on their assignments. So we really are looking at a whole child approach. We'll be leading with social emotional supports, leading with an equity lens to ensure that we have an equity and culturally responsive curricula that we're delivering. And we will also be delivering a full Ann Arbor Public Schools program. You know, I've seen this spring our drama productions online. I've seen our concerts. Our teachers have just done an extraordinary job in their learning, and we're all learning together how to ensure that we will have the full quality of the Ann Arbor Public Schools. Of course, it's never the same when we're not together face to face, and yet we are confident we will be able to deliver an academically rigorous, socially, emotionally centered, caring, and a full arts and STEAM and Project Lead the Way infused programming. When we think about the third leg of the stool, we've talked about health and safety. We've talked about academics and whole child supports. The third leg of that stool has to do with our operational and support services in the district. So we already know that food and nutrition, the school breakfast and lunch, will necessarily need to look a little bit different. So we know that our salad bars won't occur like they have in the past, and that students may be eating lunch in a classroom or in a setting that looks different from a very packed cafeteria like we did in the old days. So we know that there will be some adjustments there. We also know that our transportation services will be more on a subscription or a reservation kind of basis, so that we will be able to be sure to have the right number of drivers and buses so that our students and adults can safely socially distance as they're being transported to and from school. Also in this operations area, we're looking at our facilities planning for the fall. So we're very carefully analyzing the number of square footage in each of our buildings, how to ensure that students have that social distance that's recommended, and how many students we can safely educate within the square footage that we have. Our facilities team will be working with our school planning teams really around how to ensure at arrival and departure, marking the hallways with social distance markings, so that we will be very systematic with our engineering of the environment. Also work underway on ventilation systems, on daily following of the CDC protocols for cleaning and disinfecting the environment. It will be a very different environment when we come back to school in the fall. We're excited to see our students and our staff on August 31st, and yet we know that it will be a different environment, and we will be very much more intentional about ensuring the health and safety of everyone in our system. I want to touch base on the 3 settings on the dial for the framework. And then, Mr. Cluley, if it sounds all right, we'll just get into some conversation. What about showing that graphic in case folks have not seen that? Our Reimagine Learning Framework fits right in with Governor Whitmer's Michigan Safe Start Plan. So in phases 1 through 4 of the Michigan Safe Start Plan, we are on fully virtual instruction. And those are that is the mechanism by which we will be teaching and learning anytime we're on phases 1 through 4. Phase 5 is called Safer at Home on the governor's plan. We offer that fully virtual instruction. And in fact, I just want to be clear right at the outset of our time together that fully virtual instruction, our full program of the Ann Arbor Public Schools, will be available to every student and every family in a fully virtual setting. So if families feel like that is the best choice for them, we hear from families every day who, as a result of a variety of circumstances, feel like that is their need, that is their best choice. We will be offering that throughout the 2020-21 school year. The second setting on the dial has to do with phase 5 of the governor's plan, and that's the Safer at Home. And that setting of the dial really has to do with the blended instruction model, where students may be in distance learning for part of their time and face-to-face learning, in-person learning for part of the time. And depending on where the levels of infection are in the area, we could be at some points at a 50% occupancy. So it might mean that half of the class is joining virtually and half of the class is in-person learning. And then for some days of the week, that gets flipped so that everyone is engaged every day. But it may look differently from day to day. We are all looking forward to phase 6, and that is the post-pandemic phase. We know that we will, at some point, be able to rejoin in face-to-face, in-person instruction. We know that it probably will look different in terms of the safety protocols that we take and the cleaning and all of the other support mechanisms that we have in place. But we are looking at the 2020-21 school year as in this fully virtual or a blended with part virtual, part in-person, or a fully in-person model. That is the plan as we move into the 2020-21 school year. Thank you, Mr. Cluley. I want to share just a little bit about our timeline. You know, we are planning to have the initial kind of general planning started during this month. Our teams are already working, and I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's serving on those teams. Our teachers are very bright. They've read all the reports. They're working together with our leaders. We will sort out the absolute best general plan that we can. Then we're going to take a little break around July 4th and continue to observe the infection rates and continue to work with our Washtenaw County Health Department and health experts and work with our medical scientists and sort out, hopefully during July, by the 3rd or 4th week of July, what is the best setting on that dial where we could launch a robust and successful 2020-21 school year. So we're thinking that by the 1st of August, we would have that information published. And at that time, Mr. Cluley and I will convene a series of public meetings and talk in depth about what is the plan, more precisely, that we're looking at in terms of the 2020-21 school year. This has been an extraordinary time of us learning together. And yet, I want you to know that our leaders and our teachers and our team are doing the work They are reading deeply. We are falling alongside other districts across the country to see what are the absolute best practices out there and how can we go about this teaching and learning to give our children the very best opportunities and supports that they can have, and also keep our students and families safe. And so with that, Mr. Cluey, it's been about 20 minutes, and I know we want to get more into a conversation. What do you see, Mr. Cluey, that maybe I left out, or how shall we transition now? You're muted, Mr. Cluey. No.
The big thing that we might want to start talking about is those surveys that went out yesterday to families and students. I know that hopefully everyone that's watching this is aware of the survey. We posted the link to the parent survey on Facebook. I know we got a lot of reaction to that. We've emailed the parents and the students both the links, and we will also put that student link up on Facebook just in case there's any students that haven't gotten it yet. The students will need to have their student ID to participate.
Okay.
And this is for students in grades 3 through 12. And for the students, if you don't know your student ID off the top of your head, you can find it by logging into PowerSchool or by looking at your report cards that's posted on that. Or if you can't find it in either one of those places, if you contact the help desk at ITD, they'll be able to help you out. But that did lead to one of the comments that we got quite a bit regarding the survey was the question of, we see two options, but none of the options are full-time in school all the time. So I guess what is the reason? Why is that option not listed?
Well, I certainly hope that if that's where our parents are, there is an other there, and it asks for folks to fill in what is it that you feel you need. We felt like, based on the best science that we are hearing, and again, this can change. Remember, we're 13 weeks out from the beginning and 12 weeks yet to the start of school. So things will be changing throughout the summer. But based on the guidance that we're receiving, Mr. Cluey, the social distance will be a part of our continuing reality. And if social distance is a part of our reality, we don't have the physical space to have 100% of students in school every day. Now, I know last week at our town hall, some folks brought up, well, could we rent additional square footage in the city and put some classes in other locations? And I want to reassure our parents and our community that we are considering all of those options. So I hope that on the survey under other, if that's your strong preference, be sure to note that. We will continue to be surveying at different times through the summer, and I have heard that concern that should be there or could be there. Yes.
And also just in general with this survey, what's going to be done with the information that's gathered? When are the community members going to get to see what the survey results are?
So thank you. The first thing is that we're going to collate that probably the third week in June after the survey is wrapped up. And the first thing is it really helps our planning team, because Mr. Cluey, those questions around how many families perhaps already know, due to some circumstances in their family, they already know that they want a fully virtual setting. That allows us to go ahead and begin planning, general planning, based on what our families and our students say they need. We've said all along we want to meet our students and families and staff right where they are to ensure their needs are met, and that we're working together. By the same token, Mr. Cluey, it's very important for us to know where our staff is. If we have a certain percentage of staff who are not, because of their own circumstances, not going to feel safe returning to a face-to-face environment, we need to know that now. So we will be putting that data together. We will be sharing that out with the community. So that'll all be transparent in public. But we will also be following up to check in with everyone again during the summer, because we know that these things will change as we move through the weeks of this summer.
Great. There's also been several questions, obviously, regarding about the concern over what will happen on the days when, assuming that we're in a state where kids aren't going a full 5-day school week, what will the options be for kids on those days when they're not going to be able to be in our school buildings? Will there be childcare available? And we've mentioned some about childcare for essential workers. What about non-essential workers? What sort of options are going to be available for them?
Thank you. We did include that question on the survey also, because we wanted to begin to get an idea of the needs for childcare on those potentially, we don't know yet, but potentially on those days when students are engaged in virtual learning. The number of our parents who would say that they really need support with their students on those days. Ms. Jenna Bacalor, who is our executive director of our community division, is our district leader who oversees our child care team. I do want to give a shout out to our child care team. They're among the best anywhere. We have, as I shared last week, we've applied for grants to be able to offer child care. And I know that this is one of the priorities of the governors, is to offer childcare across the state to support our families. We're not at the point today to be able to say that we would have that childcare for every family, and that is limited by the space that we have. If social distancing is still a public health requirement, we are going to be limited by some space, although we are looking at options of leasing and leveraging additional space in the community. And I know that Ms. Bacalor and the child care team are already working through those ideas, and they've applied for grants. And we are doing, Mr. Cluley, we're doing everything in our power to be able to support our parents in every way that we can, because we know that our parents can't necessarily be at home with their children on those opposite days. We truly understand that.
Thank you. To everyone watching, you're watching the Ann Arbor Public Schools Reimagine Learning 2020-21 Town Hall, and we're taking your questions here on Facebook. Dr. Swift, there's probably a question, and I think some of it has to deal with people, what they've experienced in terms of online learning this spring versus what we're talking about going forward into the fall. There's the word synchronous is thrown out, and I think that there's some question about that. For some people, that's a good thing, that they want it. They want their children to be sitting and sort of interacting live with a teacher. And for other people, that may be a concern that, I can't get my kid to sit down at that time of day, but maybe at a different time of day I could. If you go to synchronous, am I losing out on that opportunity? Can you talk sort of about what we're seeing in terms of how virtual learning is going to be a little bit different when we come back in the fall than what it was the last several weeks?
Very good. So really about 3 things there, and I appreciate that question. First is that when we say synchronous, we mean that a teacher, our wonderful Ann Arbor Public Schools teachers, would engage directly with students in a virtual setting to deliver whether it's the lesson or the classroom discussion, that there would be real-time live engagement across students in the classroom and the teacher. Now, we absolutely hear that for some families, that just doesn't work. Their schedule needs at home, and they need to be able to access learning at a time different from the regular school day time that we might be on. So we will also be offering that daily lesson, that same classroom session, on an on-demand playback. So our families, if they're not able, let's say, for example, the morning meeting is at 9 o'clock and the literacy lesson at elementary starts at 9:30. I don't know that the team is working, but we'll just say, for example, perhaps the family can't do it then, but they'd rather do it at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. They will be able, Mr. Cluey, in our Schoology system, to go right in and play that classroom session on demand 24/7. They can do that anytime. So we're really trying to meet both that desire for a real-time live teacher and student engagement, and also that need for the schedule doesn't work for our family, we might need to get it later. So we'll do that. The third change that I wanted to mention, and I know it's a lot of change, we absolutely understand that, but we will be moving to that Schoology platform. It's really a state-of-the-art platform, more than 100 districts across Michigan, and many of our high-performing peer districts use this platform because it enables a parent and a student and the teacher to easily find all of the supports for learning in one location. You know, we heard from parents and really across the spectrum that it was a little bit confusing sometimes to get different emails, to get different assignments, for the student to have to go off to a different website to watch the video. And what Schoology allows is that the lesson, the assignments, the videos, everything, and the on-demand playback, everything in a one-stop shop. Now, we've also heard from some of our elementary teachers and parents that they just really prefer the Seesaw platform. So, you know, Mr. Cluley, we hear that. And our team is working over the summer. Our summer learning teachers are working. And we're going to refine this as we work through the weeks of the summer so that we both offer all the components that folks have appreciated, with also that one-stop shop advantage that Schoology offers.
Obviously, with all of the uncertainty about how much time kids will actually be able to be in the schools themselves, still remaining out there, technology is going to be a vital part of the program. For families that need some technology, they may have gotten through the spring without any, but we're like, okay, if we're going to be doing more, we're going to need some more technology. Will they have to wait until the school year has already begun to get get the technology from the district, or will there be some sort of way for them to get that or request it ahead of time so that right from day one their kid can be ready to go?
Thank you, Mr. Cluley. That's a great question. First of all, we are advising that with synchronous learning, it's going to be important for every child to have access to a device. So I know that some families have said this spring, you know, it's fine, our two children can share, but we really are advising that with synchronous in class meetings and those kinds of activities going on, that it's going to be best for every student to have their own device. We will be communicating over the summer, and I know Dr. Kellstrom, our technology director, and our ITD team, they're already working on how we will have all of that deployed in advance of the August 31st date, because we want to welcome our students on the first day and ensure that everyone's ready to start on time.
Sounds good. turning to the more somber reality of the situation, what is going to happen if a COVID-19 case ends up in a school, a couple of schools, whatnot? What are the thoughts on what happens then if we end up with a case within a school, either a staff member or a student?
Thank you. We are developing the protocols with our health team alongside Washtenaw County Health Department in coordination with the CDC, with our Michigan health team. So we will be using protocols. We'll be, Mr. Cluley, those sessions that you and I will be updating during, starting the beginning of August, we'll be clearly communicating what those protocols are so that we all know what happens when a case emerges and what is the process that we go through. I will say now, though, and I think it is probably obvious, but those settings on the dial might be true for the entire system if the change in setting is based on the infection rates in Southeast Michigan. But they also might have to do with the outbreak or the health status or the infection rate in a classroom or a grade level or at a particular school. So, Mr. Cluley, those settings on the dial will move across the various levels of the organization just based on what we're seeing as we move into fall.
So we're talking about what the possibilities are for school for the 2020-21 school year at this town hall forum here. Obviously this spring, there was a lot of kids that felt really overwhelmed. Kids that probably on a typical school day may not really exhibit a lot of need for a lot of extra social emotional support, but yet they were needing it in this spring, and they will likely still need it in the fall. What will the Ann Arbor Public Schools have available to help out all kids, making sure that, because we're all, and I say kids, but honestly, I know the adults are feeling it too.
Yeah.
What kind of things can we have in place to help kids?
Thank you. I was so impressed that in the initial meetings of the core team and of our principals and across our teachers, one of the number one priorities that was shared with us, and we agree with it also, is to ensure that social, emotional, mental health supports are in place. I'm very proud of our counseling and social work and school psychologists and all of our team, and that includes our teachers every day and our staff members every day. We know that this will continue to be a priority. So we'll be sharing more about that over the coming weeks. But Mr. Cluley, I just want to reiterate that we feel like that comes even before teaching and learning right now, is helping our students to heal and to feel connected and to feel supported and to continue to develop those coping strategies. This sense of isolation and separation that folks are feeling, we know our students are impacted, and we want to help, and we will be serving that need.
Thank you. Obviously, the state required this spring that grades not be taken. Is the expectation that we'll have some form of grading system in the fall? Will it be everything goes completely back to normal, or is it a little bit sort of a blend there as well?
Well, we don't know all of those answers yet. It's still a little bit preliminary, but I think it's safe to say that the work that occurs in the fall, whether that is virtual, whether that is blended, or whether that is face-to-face, students will receive feedback on that work. It will be more of a traditional environment. I feel like we have this time now to prepare. And so I can't say the exact details. Our team will be working through those, but we feel like in order to, at high school, have credit-bearing classes, in order at middle school and elementary school for our students to demonstrate their acquisition of skills, we are going to be working in a more traditional, graded or feedback appropriate setting with our teaching and learning in the fall.
Sounds good. What kind of ways could a family support, the best ways that the families could support Ann Arbor Public Schools? And my guess is that this person is really asking for all schools in general, but Ann Arbor in particular, making sure that as state and federal funds are being allocated, that districts, public schools are getting additional resources. What sort of tips and recommendations do you have to have it, families that want to ally with us, how can they do that?
I really appreciate that question. Your advocacy is key and critical, and right now is the time. And so what we understand and what we're working on is that stimulus package at the federal level. And if you think back to 2008, in the recession that we experienced at that time, it was those ARRA, A-R-R-A, American Recovery Act dollars that supported schools through those years following the 2008 downturn. So this has happened before. And yet now during COVID, the need is tremendous. And the focus, we understand it, but the focus has led with small businesses, and we know, and with business, and we know that that's key and critical to stimulate our economy. But right now is the time to sound off to your federal legislator. And I want you to know, I've personally spoken to ours, have been engaged with them, and have attended their town halls. I know that they are supportive. And yet we're finding that that package has not been approved yet. So let's continue to keep our eye on that ball. Another tip I would share is that AAPS, which is our National Superintendents Association, came out on Monday with a specific report as to how much it will cost us at public schools to reopen in a COVID environment. And Mr. Cluley, I did the math with that report, and I tweeted it out on Monday or Tuesday. It looks like, based on their estimates, it would cost the Ann Arbor Public Schools around $9 million recurring annually to meet the additional needs brought to us by the COVID impact. So there are reports emerging out there as to exactly the kind of funds we need. And we know that in times of crisis, it's best to double down on our core values. This is no time to take away from children. Our children have already missed and lost out this spring. Our children and our staff will need to feel safe in their school environment this fall. And in order for that to be true, we're going to need a lot of extra supports.
Thank you. You're watching the 2020-21 Reimagine Learning Town Hall here from Ann Arbor Public Schools. We've talked a lot about students. Obviously, as parents are sending in questions, their students are probably first and foremost in mind. But let's also look at what are we doing in terms of helping teachers be ready for this blended learning, the fact that, there's a lot of uncertainty exactly where we're going to be in the fall. What sort of efforts are being given to make sure that teachers are ready and prepared for this challenge?
Mr. Cluley, everything has changed about the way that we're doing teaching and learning, and that is represents an extremely challenging time for educators. The only one thing that has not changed about our work together is our critical mission to serve every child on every day. And yet, we know for teachers, what powers school every day is that human connection. School is a gathering place, and the magic of school is the classroom where the teacher can see the child's eyes light up and the learning occur, and the teacher can see right away when there might be an issue or a problem and address that in real time. Those kinds of connections are much more challenging remote. And you know, Mr. Cluey, I've been so impressed with all of the learning that our teachers have done. But I don't want to sugarcoat this. This is really hard work. The struggle is real. And yet I have seen teachers just continue this learning curve so that they can connect. So we will continue to share professional development. Our teachers have been coordinated into teaching learning networks. So they are working in groups of teachers, and they've just done an extraordinary job of teaching and learning from each other and of finding ways to make the work lighter. I recently had the great opportunity to do a virtual school visit with both Mitchell Elementary School and with Eberwhite Elementary School. And what I heard those teachers say was how much they appreciated, first of all, their own team, because they've been learning from each other and developing their strategies. But secondly, how much they appreciated the teaching learning network. So a group of second grade teachers or a group of social workers or a group of like-minded professionals, they appreciate that. They also shared with me just that it is much harder without that human in-person contact. So I don't want to say, I don't want to diminish the challenge of these 12 weeks. They've been steeped in deep and difficult challenge. Yet, on the other hand, we've learned a whole lot during these 12 weeks. And to me, it's very important that our teachers and our parents and our students get a little time away. And then we will have better tools in place. We will continue our professional development. We'll also be doing development for our parents around the health and safety protocols and around the technology platform, because we know that our parents have struggled also with so much of this change and challenge.
Definitely true. When we talk about students being at home, learning online, how much time are we thinking? Like when we're talking about an elementary school student or middle school student, high school student, are we talking about sitting in front of a screen for 6-7 hours a day, or what is the vision on that?
So thank you. Our team is working on the details, but we already know that part of our framework, part of our guidelines is that we want to make sure that we achieve balance and that students are balanced between their screen time in a direct classroom instructional cycle or classroom discussion cycle, that is balanced with times for physical activity, just like a regular school day. Students are in and out of classes. They also have a lunchtime and they have time for physical activity. We want to have that also be true if we are in the situation of virtual learning in the fall. So we will have more when we come back to our community the end of July, 1st of August. We will have more specifics on that, but we already know that it won't be 6 or 7 hours a day of just sitting in front of a screen.
And on the flip side of that, we've got some questions about sort of what the day will look like for students when or if they are in a school building. Things like, will they be wearing masks? What will a middle school or high school, which I know from personal experience when I've been in one occasionally, the hallways at passing times can get very crowded. and those type of things. What sort of measures are going to be taken to make it so that it's a place where the students can be and be as safe as possible?
Thank you. We will be providing detailed protocols for the time that students are at school. And we're already across the country working with other districts and putting together what that menu of options will look like. And then as we monitor the infection rates, we'll know more about where we land on those specifics. But Mr. Cluley, those ideas of students not being in large gatherings, such as lunch or assemblies, or that large gathering that might happen outside the school doors in the morning, we already know that we will be building protocols where students are not mixing and mingling closely. We know that we will follow the CDC recommended protocols for school day interactions. We feel like that will include use of a mask, but again, we're still 12 weeks out, so we're not prepared to say that for sure today, but we will be following the public health guidance for how it is that we do school. We know that lunch will likely be in a smaller setting with distance between students. We know that it will look very different in order to keep our students and our staff safe and healthy as we possibly can.
You're watching our town hall forum on Reimagine Learning for the 2020-21 school year. We've got a two-part question here. There's two separate questions, but I think they really do tie together really well. The first one being is, with all the time that the students were out of the classroom this spring, is there any thought about looking towards changing the cycle of the school year, getting away from the September to June with the summer off, and go to more of a year-round school with then breaks spaced out? So that was one question. And the other question that I think ties in very well to this is that the concern about going back into our schools, even as it is in August, with so many of our buildings not having air conditioning. Will we have more air conditioning in buildings by the start of this school year? And then the other question about the long-term, looking at the schedule.
Thank you. We absolutely are looking at all of the options, and it does occur to us that from a public health perspective, having school from both a public health perspective and the academics perspective, having school continue and having the rhythm of school perhaps shift is absolutely in our discussions and will be in our community discussions as we move forward. I do understand that the core planning team is that has entered into their discussions because we want our children to remain engaged in their learning and to be fully connected to learning. We don't want them to lose skills or have gaps because of this situation. And the second part, Mr. Cluley, was
whether or not I know that with the bond passing, air conditioning is coming for our buildings, but is it going to come fast enough? Are there going to be more buildings with air conditioning when we return to school August 31st?
Thank you. There are buildings slated for air conditioning over the summer, but I will share that we had, I believe it's 20 some buildings that were unair conditioned. So it is going to take us, we were actually in a meeting today discussing this, it's going to take us about 3 summers to get fully air conditioned across the district. So you're right, Mr. Cluley, we won't have 100% of the district air conditioned this August 31st. So we will do what we do every fall, and that is monitor the situation, monitor the temperatures. I'll tell you, I've had that on my mind a lot of days during May and June of this year, of how warm of weather that we've had on some of our recent days and what a challenge that would have been. So I'm so grateful for the support of our community for our bond. And we will be, and we are already adding air conditioning, and that process will continue over the coming summers.
So we just have a couple more minutes before we hit an hour, the 5 o'clock hour when we had planned on ending this town hall. So I want to ask a question that came in regarding for people that are a little bit worn out with using technology, but yet acknowledging that we probably aren't going to be in the building full day, every day for a full year in the fall. Are there some low-tech options? Are there some things that can be done that students can be learning while at home and yet not stuck in front of a screen that they may not feel like they're getting as much as they need from?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think we need to take a technology break and give our students just an opportunity to do something a little different. I would encourage folks as they respond to our survey, if you have ideas of what that could look like, we would love to hear your ideas. I know that our planning team and that our teachers are already discussing what kinds of activities could we send home, activity-based learning, project-based learning, what kind of reading materials. We pride ourselves in the Ann Arbor Public Schools in that whole child learning experience. So we absolutely agree that we want far more to our learning than just sitting on a screen. And so I've heard that from you today. I appreciate you sharing it. It is also our heartbeat as we think about planning. Mr. Cluey, as we get ready to wrap up, I just have one thing to add. You go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm betting that we're on the same train of thought, because I'd like to end with just congratulating the class of 2020. These students did not imagine that the school year was going to end this way. And I want to honor all of them.
That's exactly what I wanted to say is I've never been more impressed than I am with this class of 2020. And as we begin their processionals on Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. at Pathways, right, Mr. Cluey? We begin with Pathways this year.
Community.
I'm sorry, community, excuse me. We'll say that again. Community on Friday, June 12th. That's tomorrow at 4 p.m. So they will do their processional and then they will do their virtual commencement. I have never been more proud of a graduating class. And I know that they've lost so much during this spring COVID building closure during their senior year. I know that this class, born following 9/11 and graduating with COVID, they've been called to a special generation. And I just know that they're going to accomplish amazing things. But I want to offer my sincerest congratulations to the class of 2020. We're so very proud of you, and we wish you all the best in your next steps. Beyond K-12. You've certainly learned a lot of lessons and not in a very fair way, I will say, over this spring. But our hearts are with you, and we'll be cheering you on at those virtual ceremonies. I've already gotten to peek at a few of them. Mr. Cluey let me peek a little bit. And I'm so excited to see each and every one of your faces on the virtual celebration. You are special, you are honored, and we are so very proud of you in the Ann Arbor Public Schools. So I want to thank everyone that's taken your time to join us today. These are unprecedented times, and yet we are more than ever a community that's about connections. So I appreciate you taking time to connect today. Give us your survey feedback. Stay tuned. We'll continue to email you throughout the summer with updates. because we want you to have all the information when we have it available. Thank you.